My name is Jack Wallen, and today I have something that I think everyone who wants to become a writer should pay attention to. What I want to talk about is how to write your first story. You might have an idea, you might not, I don't know, but you might have the desire to write something, but you just don't know where to begin. You open up a file on your laptop or your desktop and you just stare at that blank page and you think, I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do this? Well, guess what? I have some advice for you. And I believe that if you apply this advice, it will make it really easy for you to write your first story or book. Are you ready? Let's go. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to think of an event that happened to you in the past, a real event. Something that is special, something that is important, something that was life-changing or devastating or whatever. Probably maybe not devastating at first because that's a whole nother thing. So let's stick with happy events or life-changing events for the better. So think about that moment in time. Now, what I want you to do is write a sentence. Just a sentence that says that describes what happened. Just a nice descriptive sentence, and there's something flying around here. I don't know what it is. A nice little sentence that just easily describes the event. Okay, now that you've done that, I want you to just reread that sentence. Make sure that it is not, when I say perfect, I don't mean grammatically perfect. That comes later. I mean, make sure it is the perfect description of that event. Does it evoke something? And that's important. Make it active. Make it evoke something. Okay? Make it evoke a feeling or an image. Whatever. But the important thing is that when you read that sentence, it takes you right back to that place, to that time, when that thing happened to you or you did that thing. Okay, now that you have that sentence written, expand it. Make it 2 sentences. First, this is what happened. The next sentence, this is how I felt about what happened. Or these are the side effects of what happened. Or this is how my life changed because of what happened. Okay, now you have 2 sentences. You've got a good start here. Next, I want you to flesh out that first sentence. Make it a paragraph. The important thing is that you expand on it. That sentence that said, I rode a wooden barrel down Niagara Falls. Okay, that's evocative, of course. So I rode a wooden barrel down Niagara Falls and I survived. Or I rode a wooden barrel down Niagara Falls and wound up in the hospital. Okay, you've set the stage, right? And then that second sentence says, I learned to never ride a barrel down Niagara Falls. Or I learned the limits of which my body is capable of tolerating. Okay, so you're getting somewhere, right? Now, this is where it starts to get a little tricky because you need to fill out some details, right? When did it happen? In the fall, I rode a wooden barrel down Niagara Falls. It was cold. The water was freezing cold. And because it was a a high time for vacationers, there were a lot of people around to see me go over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel. And then I saw people taking pictures. So see what I'm saying? What I'm doing is I am building on that initial statement. Okay? And the thing about your memory is that once you write that first sentence, especially when you say that first sentence aloud, your brain is going to go, oh, wait a minute, this thing happened too. And I remember this detail and this detail and this detail. And eventually you're going to start stringing together enough details that you're going to be able to write maybe a one-page story about you riding a barrel down Niagara Falls. And one of the reasons why we make this a personal is that you're not having to invent anything. Because that is where most new writers get tripped up. Because they have to use their creativity in ways that they may not be used to using to write a story. And you kind of have to get in touch with that part of your creative brain. And once you start getting in sync with it, it starts flowing a little better. So once you have that one page or half a page or whatever story written, now it's time to embellish it. This is where the fun happens, okay? So I rode a barrel down Niagara Falls, right? Okay, that's good, that's fun. Did you do it on a dare? Were you trying to escape a gang of murderers? Or were you trying to save someone who fell off the waterfall and into the drink below? And the only thing you had available was the wooden barrel? And what's really fun about this is you can just take it to wherever you want to go. When I got into the wooden barrel, I realized that it was filled with snakes. And then I climbed out and I had to turn the barrel over and dump all the snakes out. And then they attacked me. And once they attacked me, I didn't have anything to ward them off. So I had to take my shoes off and I was throwing my shoes at these snakes and they weren't going anywhere. So eventually I found a flute. And I remembered the Pied Piper was able to fend off, be able to get rats to follow them. Maybe if I play the right song, I can get these snakes to follow me. And I can get these snakes to follow me far enough away that I can circle back, jump into my wooden barrel, and go over Niagara Falls. Or I was going over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel, and as I was plummeting to the depths, I saw a UFO. And the UFO shot a tractor beam out at me, grabbed my wooden barrel and pulled it into the ship. And all sorts of crazy things happened to me then. You see what I mean? You just build on this. You build on it and build on it and build on it until you have a story. And what you've effectively done is you've taken a real event from your life and you've expanded upon it with fiction to write something that, okay, maybe you really did go over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel. And if you did, bravo. And I'm sure that other people would want to know about that experience because not a lot of people do that. I don't think anybody does that anymore. But when you embellish it with fiction, of course, you'll want to tell everybody that I didn't really get pulled into a flying saucer and get probed by these aliens because I was going over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel. You know, make sure you let the people know are reading it. Okay, this didn't really happen. Okay, I did go over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel, but there were no aliens involved, nor were there any snakes or criminals or anything. It was just me going over the edge in a wooden barrel, landed, got out, swam to shore, and everything was fine. I got in trouble. Maybe I got put in jail. Okay, I got put in jail, and there was some pretty hardened criminals in that jail. And somehow I managed to make them really like me, and they decided I was going to be an honorary member of their gang. You see what I'm talking about? You just have to riff on that one little thing. You've written one sentence, and you can take that sentence to wherever you want to go. Okay, that's how you get started with your story, right? It starts with one word. You write that first word. This is how I write every book. I start with a word or a sentence, and I write that word or that sentence. And then I go, okay, cause and effect. I wrote that sentence. What does that sentence do? Where does it go from there? It's just like putting a puzzle together. You start with the borders, like everybody does, and then you just start adding pieces as they go. That's what writing a book is like. Okay, so I want to expand on this. I want to tell you how I wrote my first book. And I firmly believe in this method, okay? And I think that anybody who struggles to write a book or is interested in writing a book and have no idea how to do it, this is how you can do it. And it's very much what I just told you. So when I wrote my first book, which was A Blade Away, what I did was I thought, okay, because I had never done this before. I had never written a book. I had written a couple of stage plays and, some monologues and other things, but I'd never written a book. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it. I just knew I had an idea for a story, and I thought, well, I can do this. So when I actually sat down to write this book, I thought, okay, I've got to make it easy on myself, because otherwise I'm going to start it and I'm not going to finish it. And if I don't finish it, that's it. Because I know me. If I don't finish something, it's done. So what I did was I wrote a sentence, what the book was about. Once I had that sentence describing what the book was, I wrote another sentence. And that next sentence was what the first chapter was about. Okay? Then I wrote another sentence. And that sentence was what the second chapter was about. And I kept going. I kept writing a sentence for each chapter. And essentially, what I did was I wrote the book. I wrote the framework of the book with each sentence. So, and I don't remember how many chapters that book had. Let's just say it was 30 chapters. I had 31 sentences. The first sentence being the description of the book, and the 30 sentences being a description of each chapter of the book. Okay, I've got that. And I'm happy with it. That's important. Once you've written all of your sentences for each each chapter, reread them. And make sure that it tells a story. Make sure that it tells a story from start to end. And make sure that the story is compelling. And that's key. Those sentences have to be compelling. They have to make you go, ooh, that sounds really cool. I want to read this. Okay? So you've got all of your sentences for each of your chapters. What do you do next? Next thing you do is you flesh out each one of those sentences. You turn each one of those sentences into a paragraph. And that paragraph can describe more in depth of what happens in that chapter. You could say, for chapter 1, I had to find a barrel. That's great. Okay, well, I had to find a barrel that was waterproof and that was big enough for me to fit in. And I couldn't find one in any store, so I had to go to a specialty store and find that. And when I found the specialty store, they asked me why I needed that barrel. And there was a sign over the counter that said, no barrels for Niagara Falls. So I had to make up a lie and tell them that it was for a party that I was throwing. Okay. You've just fleshed out that first paragraph, or that first sentence, so you know what your first chapter is all about. It's about you procuring a barrel suitable for you to go down Niagara Falls. Once you've done that, you go to the next sentence, aka the next chapter, and you do the same thing. And you keep doing that until you have fleshed out every chapter, all 30 chapters, or however many it is. Once you've done that, the rest is cake. Okay? You look at chapter 1. Okay, this is about me finding the barrel. Okay, well, we know the setting. Now we have to start introducing characters. So we know we've got me and we've got the salesperson, and I'm sure we're going to run into other people. So you just start writing that chapter because you've already written it. You've just written it into a very short paragraph form. Now you just have to turn it into a chapter. Once you've done that, you go to the next one, and you just keep going until you've written the whole book. So essentially what you've done was you've taken a sentence and turned it into a paragraph and then turned that into a chapter. And all of a sudden, writing a book becomes so less daunting of a task because you have a framework to go by. Now, this is also important. As you write, after you've written all the paragraphs, you've fleshed out your sentence, you have your paragraphs, and you start writing the chapters, things are going to change. You're going to be writing along in the first chapter, and all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a minute, I wrote something in that first chapter that's going to change something I wrote in the second chapter. So instead of, if you like what you wrote in the first chapter, instead of changing that, go and alter the second paragraph so that it's in sync with the first paragraph. And you'll have to keep doing that. I had to do that quite a bit with A Blade Away. In fact, there were a couple times where I realized, oh my gosh, there's another part of this story that I have to tell that I didn't put in my outline. And essentially that's what you were doing. You were writing an outline, it's just in a different form. So I had to keep altering and modifying. And towards the end, if I remember correctly, towards the end, I kind of had to start throwing out some of those chapters that I had come up with because they were no longer relevant to the story. And in their place, I would come up with a different chapter because the story went this way with this the original chapter was over here. So I said, okay, I have to figure out a way to get it over here, and eventually it all worked out. And I did that method. I used that method of writing until I came to iZombie. By that point, I had become so fluent at writing and attaching my creative process to the process of writing that I said, I don't need these outlines anymore. On top of which, I wanted the iZombie book to kind of be driven by a bit of chaos anyway. So I felt like an outline would get in the way of that. So I chucked the outline, I wrote that book, and by the time I finished that book, I was like, okay, well, I'm actually better at writing books without a net. So let's just never use an outline again, and I haven't. So I've probably written about 60 books without a outline of any sort. But had I not started with that outlining method, I wouldn't be where I am today. Because using that method that I created made it easy for me to actually start and finish that first book. Had I not done that, I probably would not have finished that first book. And had I not finished that first book, I would have said, well, I guess I can't do this. And I would have given up. And I'm so glad that I didn't give up. Because now I have over 60 books written and published, and I'm pretty proud of that. But the thing is, and I think that what really gets in the way of people doing this is just the fear of not being able to finish it. And if you use this method, you will start and you will finish that book. And once you finish that first book, you'll go, oh, I can do this. Let's write another. And then you'll write another outline the way I described it. You'll finish that book and you'll go, oh, okay, yeah, I got this. Let's write another. And eventually you'll go, I may not need an outline anymore. Let's just see what happens. Let's just throw caution to that wind, start writing and see what happens. Remember, cause and effect. That is the key to writing a good book. You have a cause, and you have an effect from that cause. A begets B, begets C, begets D. It's really, it really is that simple. And as long as you can tap into your creative energy, which we all can, you'll be okay. Now, if you do have trouble tapping into that creative energy, may I suggest this? Daydream. I daydream all the time, and I've talked about this ad nauseum. If you can daydream, you can come up with a story. Because that's really what our daydreams are. Those daydreams are us telling a story in our head from our imagination. Now, sometimes those stories are based on true events or something that we want to happen. I do that all the time. Some people call that manifesting. I just call it daydreaming. You know, so we all do it. So daydream, daydream, daydream all the time. And as you daydream, I would suggest you keep a pad of paper with you or your phone. And when all of a sudden an idea is going to hit you while you're in the middle of that, you know, you've kind of disappeared from reality and you're thinking of something really cool. You're going to come up with an idea for a book. Write it down. Cannot tell you how many times I've come up with a really cool idea for a book. I didn't write it down because I thought, no, I'll remember this. And I didn't remember it. And I had to rack my brain and rack my brain and rack my brain. And then sometimes it comes to me and sometimes it doesn't. And I have to go, well, that was a good idea, but I guess I'll never figure it out. I'll never remember it. I have on occasion had that happen to me and then 2 days later go, oh yeah, I remember that idea. It's how our brains work. So don't be afraid. Don't be so afraid of writing that you don't even try. And if you follow this method, you will find it's considerably easier than you think. As long as you can tap into your creative energy in your mind, in your heart, your soul, and all that. It can happen. You can make it happen. You can do this. One word, one sentence at a time. Remember, think about it this way. If you write 1 page a day, in 365 days, you will have a full-length novel. It took me about 1.5 years or 2 years to write my first novel. And now it takes me about 2 to 3 months to write one. And it took me so long to write that first, and it took me a long, that's a long time for me. And for a lot of writers, that's pretty normal. But it took me so long to write that first one because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. And this was way before Facebook and all these other social media where you have accessibility to all these people. I was on my own. I had never taken I had taken a playwriting class. But I had no idea what I was doing. I was making it up as I went along, literally and figuratively. And thankfully, I came up with that method that helped me make it happen. So trust yourself. Trust this method that I've described to you. Give it a try and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, no blood, no harm, no foul. You can try something else. There are so many different methods for writing a story. This is just the one that I use to get me going. But I have absolute faith in this method, and I believe that it will make it possible for you to write that first story and then that first book and then the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And there you go. That is Jack Wallen's advice for how to write a book. I hope it helps you. I truly do. And if it doesn't, then I hope that it at least inspires you to try to find another method of doing so. Because if you have that story in you, you need to get it out. Thank you so very, very much for spending a little bit of time with me on this chilly day in December. I hope you're warm, I hope you're happy, and I hope that you and everyone you know and love have a wonderful, wonderful day.